Welcome everybody to the third episode of Talking Heads in Heidelberg. Tonight we have a guest from London. It's the artist Hrair Sarkissian, who was born in Damascus and whom I met in 2006 for the first time when I was studying in Arles. And since then we are following each other's work and keep in contact. And it's not, I have to say, it's not the first time. The other artists had their first time in Heidelberg. It's his second time, so he spent 2 days already in 2007 in the city, and was mentioning back then that it would be great to have a residency for artists in Heidelberg, and I agreed back then, and it still didn't happen. We had several attempts to make it possible, and we hope also with this series to give an outlook what this exchange of artists and scientists could bring. We are here and we are guests of Professor Dr. Anne Peters, who is one of the directors of this institute, and she will also welcome you.
Yes, good evening. For me, it's an extraordinary pleasure to be able to participate in this art event here. I would like to welcome you also on behalf of my co-director, Armin von Bograndi, who's sitting in the first row. And we both agreed that we never saw this room in such a light. It's very strange for us. Normally we have the so-called Referentenbesprechung, the Monday meeting, where we discuss recent events of international law, but not with green, yellow and pink light. So I'm really pleased, and actually I never participated in a gaming show, and neither have I watched a gaming show, so it will be a new thing for me.
Good evening everyone. First, thank you Joscha for this brilliant evening, and also Dr. Anne Peters for hosting this event. It's really a pleasure to be here. So I prepared this short presentation. It's kind of just to give you a brief my background, how I came into photography and how I started. So I came to photography because my father was a photographer, and so when I was a kid, the day school was finished in the summer, the next day I would go and work in my father's lab. At a really young age, I was 6. So at the beginning I was only doing coffee and cleaning, wiping floors, etc. And then started working with him officially. So my father, he was a commercial photographer. He used to make photograph weddings, social events, this kind of photography. And then when the color photography came into the market with the color films, they had this process where they used to send the films to Lebanon to develop them, because in Lebanon was always more advanced, more open to import-export. And this whole process of sending the films to Beirut, develop, print them and bring them back, it took at least a week minimum. And from that process my father got very anxious, and he just came up with the idea of opening a lab in Syria, which happened in 1976, and he opened the first color lab in Damascus, and it was a big success for him, and I was also kind of the messiah for this lab to take over, which I did later. So this is my father, and so the lab he called it Dream Color, because he had always this dream to open the lab. In this lab we used to develop 2,000 films a day, and there was 15 employees, more than one shift, and this is basically where I grew up. And at age 11 I started working on a first computerized printer machine, which was made by Kodak, and it did print 10,000 images per hour, and this was a kind of revolutionary. It was before the Minilab. And when I was at this age, I always wanted to become a photographer, and that was my obsession, and I did not want to become anything else than photographer in my future. So after I finished high school, I went to university for 1 week, but I hated it, so I told my father, I don't want to study, I want to work with you in the lab. And this is what happened. I took over the lab for 12 years. And after 12 years, I just reached to a level where I couldn't go up, further up. And then I decided to quit and become a photographer artist. And for me and for the family, this was a very big decision, and it did cause a lot of troubles also within the family. But I did stay on that decision. I did not change, and from then on, I started to think as an artist, a photographer. So my background, I am Syrian, born in Damascus, but I have Armenian origins. I am the second generation of survivors of Armenian genocide, and most of my work, especially recently, I've been working on this issue a lot, because as Armenians, being minority in diaspora, we have always carry on us from day one we're born the burdens of the Armenian genocide, and this is something, although I did not experience nor my father, but it's something, it stays with us, and we carry on, and we inherit it to the coming generations. And from here I will what I will do today, I will talk about two recent films I started working on. One was finished last year. It's called Sweet and Sour. So it's the Sweet and Sour is basically the story of my grandfather. So both my grandparents, before they met in Aleppo, got married. They were both married to different persons when they were living in Eastern Anatolia. This is pre-genocide. And my grandfather, he had a son, and his wife were in this village. It's called Khansorig, which in Armenian means small apples, because in this village they were known with their small apples. So the village is located southwest of Lake Van, nowadays Turkey. And I've never been to this village, nor my father. And my grandfather, he was never able to go back after the genocide. And in 2021, I decided to go to the village. And I took my equipment, and I decided to film in the village, where I stayed 2 days and filmed around, and also traveled in the region. During my childhood, we never had, this is my grandfather. He was born in 1886. I never met him too. When I was born, he was already passed away. And so when so I traveled there and I filmed, but in our household, we never had any sort of physical documentation of this place. The only thing we had, the stories that my father heard from my grandfather, and he passed it on, and music and also dance, the folkloric dance. So I went there and I filmed, and then I went to Damascus after being away for 11 years because of the war. I did not return because I was always afraid to being drafted in the army. So I went there after 11 years, and I put these footages on a screen in a room, and I asked my father to sit in front of this clip, the video, and look at them without. So when I traveled there, I never told my father. I told him I was going to Italy, because I knew if I told him I was going there, he would be really very worried. So I put him in the room, and I said, these are images from the village where your father came from, and I am leaving you alone in this room, and you're not asking me any questions until we finish. So these are the images from the region where I traveled. So I stayed here in this family. where they basically took over the houses of the Armenians who were living there. Of course, everyone in this village was killed. No one left, and the village is in the middle of between two mountains. It's not something very accessible. So I stayed there with the family. Of course, the family were located here in 1950 by the Turkish government, and they don't own these lands. So when I contacted this family, the first question they asked me, what are the reasons that you are coming? Because they are always, are you coming to claim lands? I said, no, I'm coming to claim dreams. Because the main concern for them that I go there, or anyone from previous families, and claim lands, because they don't own these lands. So that was the whole, that was the question that I've been asked. And when I was there, the first question they asked me when they first met me, they asked me, do you know where the gold is? Because this is also basically, it's in Eastern Anatolia where the Armenians were located. When the genocide started taking place, all these families hid their treasures or whatever of their own, and because thinking they will come back one day. Of course, they never did. And nowadays in Turkey, this is a hobby where they go with the metal detectors and go around where Armenians used to live, churches, cemeteries, graves, houses, and they start just digging in case they just receive any sort of sign. So the village itself, nothing has changed. Everything, it's as if people just left yesterday and these families just were settled today. They haven't changed anything in these houses or in the field. So this is my father. He was watching the footages. It's around, I think the whole installation, it's around 21 minutes, and it's basically one screen is the landscapes, one screen is my father watching these landscapes, and one is me sitting on top of a mountain facing the historical Armenia that we as Armenians lost. So the next project is also about my grandmother, and this is very recent, and it's a work in progress. It's called 40 Spoons, and it's so my grandmother also was married to someone else, and she had 2 kids, and the 2 kids were thrown in the river. In a town in Armenian, it's called Dudan, and in Turkey now, in Turkish, because they changed all the Armenian names into Turkish names. And in Turkey today it's called İlbey. And this is north of a city called Muş, which exists until today. And the story, I started the story by interviewing my aunt, and she was the youngest among her siblings, and she was the one who spent most of the time with her mother. And her mother, instead of telling her children's stories, the only stories she shared with her was stories about her life in this village and about her 2 kids that she lost and the family of 40 people. They were known as 40 Spoons because they were family of 40 members, and everyone were killed during the genocide except 2 who survived, my grandmother and her father's brother who escaped. So this final project is called Final Flight, and this is sort of a story about a bird called Northern Bald Ibis. The bird is 5,200 years old, and it existed in the Old Testament as a fertility messenger, and the Egyptians had the god of Thoth, which is the god of wisdom and writing. And also in Islam, the bird was used as a guide for the pilgrims when they used to go to Mecca, especially the ones from Syria and Turkey. From that region, they followed this bird. So these birds existed in Syria in the desert of Palmyra until 1930s, and the Syrian government confirmed the extinction of these birds in late 80s. And in around 2003, the Bedouins found a colony nesting near Palmyra, 7 birds. And among these 7, there was one female who knew the migratory route from Palmyra all the way to Ethiopian highlands. And these other birds always followed the female during their migratory route. So the Bedouins informed the Syrian government, but the government never paid attention. They thought it was an anecdote until Gianluca Serra, who was a geologist, Italian, based in Florence, heard about this phenomena, and he flew all the way to Palmyra to confirm. And he lived in Palmyra for 9 years. And with the help of the first Syrian lady, they built a breeding center to make more babies of these birds and to grow these birds more in that region. Of course, the project started taking really well, and they reached 17. From 7, they reached 17 birds, young and adults. So the adults always managed to travel all the way to Ethiopia during migratory season, but the adults always stationed in Saudi Arabia because they couldn't fly further. And there was a point where Gianluca started to realize that these numbers started to decrease again. And then, and since all these birds were tagged with satellite bands, one day he followed one of these signals were still blinking in Saudi Arabia, and then he realized that actually the reason that the numbers is decreasing is because the Saudis are hunting these birds and to stuff them, and it becomes eventually like a model, like an ornament. And from there, the number really went to 4, because mainly because of shooting and also electrical cables. And in 2003, when ISIS entered Palmyra, of course, everyone fled, including the birds. And that was the first time when they've seen these birds flying. Zenubia, the female one, they saw Zenubia flying for the last time over the skies of Palmyra. So these birds exist today in breeding centers, but they are not migratory birds. So there is a whole new program at the moment in Italy, Morocco, Turkey, where they are introducing to these birds how to fly from one place to another. So this is, I just included images, installation images where I made a mold of the skulls of the birds, 7 birds, which is how the story started. And opposite facing these birds, there is a 9 hours video of, which is the migratory route from Palmyra. It starts in Palmyra, it ends in Ethiopia. And on the left there is one image which was taken by an Italian diplomat in Palmyra, and this was the last time they were photographed. And this is like an aluminium panel with a relief where we see the line of the trajectory of their journey, and it's kind of symbolizes the noose. Thank you for listening. That was it.
My talk is about law, and that's a subject that is not told in school, so seeing that there are not many lawyers here in the room, I would like to try to explain a little bit about what I'm doing. So maybe you can switch the slide. So this is my workplace. When our son was small, he said, "Oh, Mama, isn't that completely boring, your work? You're sitting in front of the computer all the time." So not even playing any games. So that's how it looks like. But doing law means to deal with law in very different roles. For example, you can be more on the side of practice, working as a judge or as a counsel or as an administrator, whereas I work as a scholar. So legal scholars write books and articles on legal problems. And these products of scholarly work, they can prepare some practical issues. For example, they might prepare a lawyer's brief, or they might prepare a judgment or a legal contract. But scholarship can also be done without a particular view to a specific concrete problem, and that's what we then call foundational or basic legal scholarship. Generally speaking, scholarship or science is the production of knowledge, guided by a scientific method. So the question is, what is the legal method? Because the method defines the discipline. And I would say that the legal method, the method of legal scholarship, is not mainly empirical, but it's argumentative. Of course, we also work empirically by observing facts. For example, factual facts, like on the war in Syria or now in Ukraine, and legal facts. We have to look at the legal text that exists, for example, which treaties are there, which resolutions have been passed by the UN General Assembly, which reports are written by Human Rights Council, Commission of Inquiry, for example, on Syria. And then comes the argumentative part. Every legal practitioner has to do that work of interpreting legal texts for deciding a case, for example. For example, it's necessary if one ever wants to try and convict Assad for committing crimes against humanity, then one has to apply and interpret legal texts. And as a scholar, the scholars then, working on this problem, they write, as I said, books and articles about the question in order to sometimes prepare or help better understand these issues. For example, here I have a book which I took from our wonderful library in order to prepare for tonight. It's from 2020, and the title is Imagining Justice for Syria. So it's all about what are the legal aspects of the war, and mainly about the crimes committed and how the crimes must be assessed in law and what could be done to bring the criminals to trial. The general legal style of argumentation is called doctrinal. And doctrinal scholarship consists of interpreting the rules, as I said, and also combining rules so that they make sense, or also to identify ruptures in the different legal materials and inconsistencies, and these then can also be criticized. For example, now coming back to my main example of Syria and Assad and his entourage committing all kinds of crimes, especially crimes against humanity, which are widespread systematic attacks against the civilian population. That's the legal definition of a crime against humanity. As a doctrinal lawyer, one needs to examine the various elements of that crime. One would also have to examine the question of attribution, so to whom, who is the author of the crime, who would be then possibly found guilty. One has to look at the question of immunity, because high politicians, they cannot be tried before the courts of another country because they enjoy this immunity. And then there are questions of whether to also apply human rights, for example, the right to life or the right of physical integrity. Then there are questions of extraterritorial application of the law. Can for example, a human rights treaty be applied also outside the territory of the state, which is a party to a certain human rights treaty, and so on. So these are typical doctrinal questions, and I guess, maybe not really understandable. So now I'll come to something else, namely borrowing methods from other disciplines. For example, lawyers, they can work as legal historians, studying how a conflict, for example, developed. Or there are also people who do sociology of law. And that means not arguing inside the law, as I just explained, but looking more from the outside at the legal material, looking at who makes which arguments, what are the economic and cultural side conditions of this discourse. And then there is, of course, an important branch of legal philosophy or legal ethics. And in that field, we would raise questions, for example, whether it is appropriate that soldiers, so-called combatants, are allowed to kill lawfully in the war. That's called the combatant privilege. And the combatant privilege means that the person cannot be tried for murder
for example, when he's imprisoned as a war prisoner. Whereas if the person does the same thing here in Heidelberg, of course, that will be called murder. So there is a philosophical question whether this combatant privilege is justified nowadays, whether it is still ethically appropriate. Next slide. So the question now, what can legal scholarship, as I described, what can it achieve? What are the outcomes? There are clearly, legal scholarship cannot bring about any changes in the real world, at least not immediately. Here we see a scene from the earthquake. So it's clear that legal arguments can't change anything. The most practical consequence would be to influence, together with other voices, to influence the case law so as to bring about a new judgment, or to contribute arguments to make a new treaty, or give rise to a new legal policy. So these would be possible, though indirect, outcomes of legal scholarship. Here you see a picture of the United Nations Security Council. I just used that as an example for possible indirect results of legal scholarship. The normal consequence is only that the articles and books we write contribute to the legal discourse. For example, there is an important debate about the use of the so-called right of veto in the Security Council. The Security Council is the most powerful body inside the United Nations. 15 states are on that council. 5 of those states are so-called permanent members. These are the ones who had won the Second World War. And these 5, they're called the Permanent 5, the P5, they have the right to veto and any decision that the Council wants to take. For example, in the war, concerning the war in Syria, Russia had exercised its right of veto 12 times. Last time was in July last year, when the question was whether border crossing for humanitarian assistance should be allowed. And the Security Council, there was a draft of a decision to impose an opening of the border in order to deliver humanitarian assistance, but Russia exercised the veto. So you can ask the question here, the legal question, is this veto, is it lawful? It is written in the United Nations Charter, but one could argue that this is abusive, that it is an abusive veto, that, for example, and there are other legal arguments you can make, that Russia in such a case would have to abstain from exercising the veto. And then you can spin the argument further. You could ask, well, if this veto is abusive, what are the legal consequences? Would this veto then be null and void? And so on. But of course, these are scholarly arguments, and if there is no political will by the decision makers to draw any consequences, then they are just what they are. They are on paper, one could say. Here I am showing you the cover of a forthcoming book. I'm just looking at the proofs of this book. I co-edited this together with a younger colleague. The title of the book, it's about armed intervention and consent, and Syria plays a very big role in this book, because during this war there was the very important game changer that Syria invited Russia to help oppress the opposition, and Russia entered the war in 2015. Normally, under international law, a state may invite for help from the outside to do as it pleases. But you can of course say now, is it still lawful that such a criminal, in order to continue to commit atrocities and crimes, can invite Russia for helping to commit such atrocities? A legal argument might be that such a government forfeits its power to invite a third state in order to commit these crimes. So we could argue that such an invitation is not valid, again, under international law. And that's one theme in the book. you see that the book is, still leave it on, so it's called Max Planck Trialogues on International Law. It's a series which consists of books about topics of peace and war, written by 3 authors, and these authors apply different methods, and they have different ideational backgrounds, and the idea is to make more visible the pluralism of the international legal discourse and to bring to the fore the multi-perspectivism that is necessary to understand international legal problems. So the main objective of scholarship here is, of course, to better understand the legal issues. But a goal of scholarship can also be sometimes to push for changes in the law. For example, with regard to animals, and that's why I also like your last project very much, I would like to improve the fate of animals. Here you see a victim of the Ukrainian war. It's one of the thousands of farm animals killed in Ukraine, either because they starved, because their owners they fled, or because they were directly hit. So the question is, when legal inquiry that seeks to push forward the law, to bring about legal reform, whether that's still scholarship or when does it transgress the borderline to activism? There is the reproach that scholarship that seeks to bring about certain political goals, that this is not scholarship but scholactivism. And of course there is the danger that a writer lacks the critical distance that is needed to treat a topic in a scholarly manner. When you are passionate about something, then there is the danger of losing this critical distance. And there is also the temptation to interpret the law one-sidedly. And if you do that, this is in opposition or even in contravention of the scholarly attitude of open-endedness of the research. I would say that as a scholar you have to be ready to find any results or no results. You have to be completely open. That's, I would say, a quintessence of research. But if you do this call activism, then there is the temptation to give easy legal answers as opposed to asking legal questions and raising problems. And that's of course also in tension to the scholarly attitude of problematizing, asking questions as opposed to giving ready-made answers. So when examining the legal material on animals in war, and when identifying the problems, then scholars, even if they're passionate, for example, about animals, then they have to pursue this following the ideal, at least as an ideal, the ideal of impartiality and critical distance, even if this ideal can never be fully attained. I'm showing you here now the cover of a book which is already on the market. I co-edited that together with a specialist in international humanitarian and criminal law. And here, this book on animals in the international law of armed conflict, the authors, they all of course, we recruited people who were interested in writing about this subject, and I think they all cared for animals. So I assume they all had a favorable attitude towards animals, and they wanted to suggest, and they did in this book, in the various chapters, we should suggest interpretations of the law that might help animals. For example, there is a chapter on veterinarians, and with the argument that the special protection granted by the Geneva Conventions on the law of war to medical equipment and personnel should also be granted to veterinarians. Or there is another chapter arguing that the rules on the special protection of cultural heritage, that they could also apply to zoos as a cultural heritage. Or a bit more daring interpretation that the civilian population in a country is not only made up of humans, but there is also an animal civilian population. And I still claim that this is serious scholarship in that book, and that it is not only activism. And now I conclude. So here, that's a picture of the earthquake now. The legal arguments never immediately help victims, also not the victims of the earthquake now, but legal arguments might indirectly contribute to reducing suffering by providing arguments. And for example, now with the earthquake, there is the legal question whether the sanctions that are imposed on Syria by the European Union, by the United States, Canada, and so on, whether these sanctions, which already have humanitarian exceptions, but whether these exceptions need to be now made larger in order to bring the humanitarian goods quicker to the population. And the EU, for example, has lifted the requirement of getting a permission for delivering medicine and so on. So that's a legal question. Legal arguments can provide some help. And then there is also the question of, that I already mentioned, of the humanitarian corridors to enter the country, even if the Syrian government opposes it, because you can argue that also this such an opposition is arbitrary and violates the right to life, etc. And I now would like to conclude with a response to your work Last Scene, which I found in the catalog. Maybe we'll speak about that work later. So Last Scene, I understood you went to mothers of persons who were disappeared, so who were abducted by police forces, and in the catalog we see a picture of the place, for example, the chair where the mother had last seen the person kidnapped. And as far as I understand, that's also a wide-scale technique in Syria, the enforced disappearance. And I found that the pictures make the suffering visible by showing the empty spaces. But of course, through your art, you can never undo the suffering or bring back the persons. And the same also with law, that there are many legal steps that have been taken to react to this crime. There is, for example, a convention against forced disappearance, which was adopted in 2007 and which has now 32 state parties. This was particularly pushed by Latin American countries, where forced disappearance was also a widespread crime. So there is a new crime with a new name, and there is also the possibility in law to grant reparations. And of course, a reparation or paying money can of course never pay the loss in any way. However, some legal schemes, for example, recognizing a right to the truth, so that the truth must be told, and other mechanisms of what we call transitional justice, maybe can make a very modest contribution to alleviating suffering. So that's not really my conclusion. The law, I think the law is really only a very, very tiny element of governance. It's also a part of our language, it's a part of our culture, but a quite modest and small part. And in this small element, law, international law, is one of the weakest branches of law. It's very often violated with impunity, as we see in the wars in Syria and Ukraine. The weakness has several reasons, because there is no centralized sanctions and various reasons. And on the slide, I quote a very famous international lawyer, Hrair Sarkissian, whose almost entire family was killed as being Jews by the Nazis. He's from Lemberg. And he wrote in a paper famously that international law is at the vanishing point of law. And in international law, the laws of war are even at the vanishing point of international law. And the same applies, I would say, to animal law, which is also a very weak branch of law. And bringing international law and animal law together seems to accumulate the differences to the extreme. But I would also submit, and that's another quote on the slide, that lawyers can and should pursue a realistic utopia, proceeding from, and here I quote the philosopher John Rawls, proceeding from the international political world as we see it and extending what are ordinarily thought to be the limits of practicable political possibility. And Lauterpacht, writing on the vanishing point of law, he wrote in the same paper, the lawyer must do his duty, there was no her, so his or her I add, regardless of dialectical doubts, though with a feeling of humility. End of quote, Lauterpacht. And I think that lawyers should do that based on rationality, but we know that our rationality is very bounded, especially when it comes to the laws of war. We should pursue the job also based on feelings of compassion, on feelings of outrage about injustice and feelings of solidarity. I think these are feelings that inform our moral and also our legal judgment.
We asked the artists, we asked the scientists to prepare 7 questions for each other. These 7 questions they sent to us and we printed them out on cards. These cards are to be found on the table in front of Hrair and in front of Anne.
Okay.
You have on your left side of your chair, here you have a red bucket, there you have a green bucket. In front of you have a bowl of trophies. And for each question that you manage to answer successfully, you will get a trophy. So we are counting the trophies of these two. We have a special situation tonight also because Anne Peters decided not to hand in only 7 questions, but 11. And
I also made 11, but I deleted them.
Well, lucky you, because this gives you an advantage, because from these 4 extra questions, you have 2 more questions here. And these 2 questions, in case you come to a question you don't feel like answering, or it's impossible, you have a joker.
Oh, okay.
So you can switch.
Well, that's not very fair for Anna, I think.
I'm used to that.
I placed them here for you, in case needed. Please turn your card.
Should art be political? No. And can art not be political at all? Yes. My work is, I don't see my work at all political, because for me, can I put the question here?
Yes.
So, for me, all the works I've done, it's not about raising a finger at something and who did it and why. And for me, it's all about emotions and feelings that that has been created from these traumas that I've been working on. One of them is the Armenian genocide, for instance, and one of them the people who disappeared, the Bird Project. And it's for me, it's I don't want to accuse anyone, because, for instance, when I did the project about Last Scene, I traveled to 5 countries, and for the main interest for me doing that project is to raise how all these women who lost their loved ones been standing on their feet for 25, 30, 40 years waiting for their loved one to come back. And for me, this is the most important thing in this project. It's not about who did what, and I'm not interested in, I have my political opinions, but I keep it for myself. I don't include it in my work. But of course there are artists who do also political works as well. I mean, that's it's something that exists.
I guess you gather from the question that I don't agree with your answer, but of course it's not wrong. So you get a point.
Okay. So I'll get the ball. That's
You get a ball, please take the ball and put it to your, or you can keep it in your hand. I mean,
No, it's okay.
Okay.
next question for you, Anna. Please open it up.
Okay. First of all, I think that your question contradicts your answer you gave to my question. That's my first observation. I think that artists can play important roles for international law. There is, for example, now quite recently a material turn in law, also in international law, that lawyers or legal scholars try to get away from only analyzing texts, as I explained, but also looking at objects. For example, there's an ongoing PhD project on the architecture of the Palais des Nations, the building of the United Nations in Geneva, and analyzing this architecture with a view to, does it impact the law that is produced in that building? And in order to do such research, I'm sure that the lawyers also have to talk to the artists. But that's maybe not exactly the witness role you meant, but it's more like interdisciplinary collaboration. But I see a role.
Okay.
Is this worth a point there?
Yes.
Please take the trophy.
Okay, and we can choose, right?
At the moment, you can still choose. Yes. Are you ready, Red, for the next question? Please turn the page now.
Okay, I will start with the second phase of the question. Does your assessment of your own work change? I mean, so far nothing has changed in that regard, but I hope it will, because, and for me that's also my purpose of doing this kind of works, and to reach a wider range of people with these issues as well. I mean, that's my. Do you think?
Maybe I had an example. My example is that Mozart apparently during his whole lifetime thought that Idomeneo is and was his best opera.
Yes. I mean, the thing it's kind of I mean, as an artist, it's when this kind of thing happens, it kind of puts the artist in a loop. So it's also it doesn't it's. I mean, I have an example in my work. I did a project about public execution squares, and I mean, I am known for doing this work. But at I reached a point where I just don't want to look at these images anymore, and also because it's not the only thing I've done in my career the past 15 years. I've been doing so many other things, but people keep pointing at this work, which is, I mean, I admire and I did it for a reason, that's a piece, but still I moved on, and yeah.
Okay.
You're the judge.
I think that in a way you now answered the question with yes, saying that you are the person most qualified to value your work because you know that you now produced other work which is equally good or maybe even better. So you think that you are the best person to judge, like Mozart about Idomeneo.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's also the other reason is I wouldn't put it out there if if I don't have the full confidence and that
Sure.
that the work should be there.
Yeah, sure. Same. I think what I really liked also in doing the questions is that for me I see so many parallels between scholarly work and artwork, but maybe non-lawyers don't see it. But, okay, so you have a point. Yeah.
Very good. Next question is coming up for you.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Here we go.
should I read it for everybody, or is that not part of the game? Huh? Because maybe some people. So every dictatorship, ethnic cleansing, genocide invariably starts by either deporting or killing the intellectuals, the artists, the writers. The erasure of culture as a tool of war. Is healing possible? I'm not a psychologist, and I have more limited experience than you with such violence. So I only can say from my small experience that, as you said, I think that the trauma is often transported over the generations, and that even if you didn't hear the stories, that there are phenomena that somehow the pain resurfaces in somebody of the next or after generation. I think there is also psychological research on that. So this would mean that the healing process is very slow and is impeded by this kind of transmission. The legal aspect I see in your question is that there is something which is called cultural genocide, but it's very controversial. Where are the limits? Because, as you surely also know, especially the word genocide is itself also used as a propaganda slogan, that the reproach that the other side has committed or is committing genocide is also too easily used, I think. For example, Russia, again, sorry about Russia. So Russia claimed that there is genocide ongoing in Ukraine, which is not based by the facts. On the other hand, there is the investigations whether Russians have committed genocide, and it's the same in other words. So genocide is a huge word, and according to the legal definition as it is endorsed in the, for example, in the Convention on Genocide, which was drafted in 1948 in response to the Second World War, and in the Statute of the International Criminal Court from 1998, the definition of genocide comprises several possible acts, and one of them is also, for example, transferring children from one group to the other with the intention to erase the group, and that could be also already called erasure of culture. And as I said, there is also debate whether other destruction of artifacts only in quotation marks, without killing persons, like what also has been done in Syria a lot, the destruction of cultural monuments, that the definition, the legally accepted definition of genocide, should be extended to these acts. So that's a legal debate. And I cannot answer the question on healing, but I can say that what I also said in the talk, the idea of reparation in form of symbolic activities, that's very big in the Latin American continent, for example, that there has to be, streets have to be named after the victims, or a prize has to be established in commemoration of the distinguished group, or memorials have to be set up and so on, so that these measures can maybe help a little bit, but they can't heal. That's my answer.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think healing comes when also the other side would also accept the actions that they took. And this is the case also in, when we talk about the Armenians, also the case of all these people who disappeared. For instance, in Lebanon, there are 17,000 people who disappeared during the civil war. And so all these people who were participating in that civil war in the 80s and 70s, they are now in the MPs in the government, and if they are not, their children are. So no one, until today, they did not indicate where they threw the bodies, because these mothers, the only thing they want is just to find the remains and to give a closure, and this is nothing happened, and this is, I think, the most important thing, that when they do that, these families can move on, because that was the moment for them when life has stopped. The moment when they lost someone and they didn't move on because they don't know where the person is. And I think that this process has,
Two sides.
yes, in healing, absolutely, yeah. And I'll give you a trophy.
You're still kind to each other, very good. So Hrair, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is more important for making art for me is, as I said, to reach out as much as possible and share the pain of the others all around. I think this is what's the most important thing in my artistic career. I learned taking pictures, and there is a point where I don't really care about that anymore, because I'm so much when I start working on project, I'm more concentrating on feelings, pain, and sharing than techniques or which kind of it's so for me it's more important. It's easy to reach techniques, but I don't think it's very easy to reach others' emotions and pains and share and also feel.
But is it really so easy to reach the mastery? Maybe it's easy for you because you worked since the age of 6 in your father's lab. So I suppose that there must be, speaking among photographers, or artists as photographers, there must be a minimum level of handcraft in order to be accepted as part of the game.
Yeah. The thing is, nowadays, I know when I studied in Amsterdam, I did photography BA, and for me that study, it was not a study for me, it was more like a photo club. There was no technique teaching, there was nothing, it was just every week we bring a set of pictures, lay them on the table and talk about it. So one teacher would say, these are amazing, and the other say, these are really rubbish.
Okay.
So this, for us, this was the way, for me, this has nothing changed in my way of looking at things, photographing, and I even had a sort of struggle with my teacher, because he wanted me to stop working with the large format camera technique and start taking pictures with the mobile, which I did, and then said no, go back to the technique camera, because it's something I can't use it. And I think this is nowadays you don't need technique anymore. I'm talking more in photography, and I'm sure Joscha would. They don't. It's like people get cameras and take pictures, and there is no.
There is no technique anymore.
There is technique. If they want to know techniques, there is, but they just take it the easy way.
The results are the same, technically speaking.
I wouldn't see it the same, no. I think above, also more than the technique, it's what is important is the eye. Training the eye and the way looking. And this is something you need to learn and to experience and to feed your vision. And I think this is something that is lacking too.
To the normal people, yeah, okay. Of course,
It
yes.
is a point.
Yeah, your answer was very clear. The message is more important, although you said you're not a political artist, okay?
Did you take your trophy? Because we should not forget this at the end.
Okay.
Anna, please, your next question.
I read it out. Given that principles of international law are supposed to be applied equal, actually upholding these principles often seem to be dependent on Western political considerations. How do you square that? That's, of course, a very important observation on the current international legal system. And actually, you got it really right. So there is the principle of sovereign equality of states, which is enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations, and which is you could say a bedrock of international law. And actually, it's not so old, because before the era of the United Nations, so before 1945, it was still accepted, more or less accepted, that the states are that they have different degrees of sovereignty, suzerainty, and vassal states, and so on. So the real clean slate, formally speaking, theoretically speaking, that all states, big and small, rich and poor, and North and South, that they have one vote, for example, in the United Nations General Assembly, and they all are entitled to respect for their territorial integrity and so on. But in real life, in real international legal life, the effects of the unequal economic, political, military power are very tangible in international law and do influence the application of the law. And that leads to an uneven application of legal principles, that a powerful state is better protected, de facto better protected, and also can more easily get its way, and also violate the rules and disregard the interests of the smaller ones without being sanctioned. And then comes the additional point, what you mentioned on your slide, on the card, that these are Western political considerations. And yes, it's true that the current legal system, and I often mentioned also in my talk, 1945 as a turning point. So the current system, roughly speaking, the markers have been created in 1945, and many ideas are liberal ideas, and they rely on Western political models. However, it's not as simplistic as that, because I think the West is also quite a gross simplification, because there are quite huge differences among states that we call Western states, also with regard to legal culture. For example, in the United States, there are different views about human rights. For example, people think that they have a human right to carry arms, and that there is the death penalty in many states, which in Europe is pretty much really outlawed. So there are differences among Western states. But of course, in other parts of the globe, which we also label like Asia or so, the differences in cultural and legal terms are probably even bigger. Huh? That's what people from Asia always say. That Europe is so homogeneous, and that they are so different. So the overwhelming influence of, roughly speaking, Northwestern ideas, it is there. And another important point is that the remnants of colonialism, of colonial domination by states of the North over, roughly speaking, states of the global South, is also still very visible. But this is criticized more and more now. There is a big wave of critique against that, and I think that the critique also reflects the power shift, because there are non-Western states on the rise, BRIC states, China and so on, because they are becoming more powerful. The critique or the unease they had, the feeling that they were pulled over the table, that certain treaties were imposed on them, that they got unfavorable conditions and so on, they felt this before, and they maybe said that before, but they were not heard. And now they are heard more, and I think it's important also to listen to them, and I think it's justified that they are heard more. However, there is always also the tendency kind of to scapegoat the past, or to scapegoat the West, and to speak of double standards and hypocrisy. That is, it is sometimes justified, but often it is also not justified. So hopefully the final time I'll mention Russia now, that, for example, Putin, in justifying, in explaining the blatant aggression towards Ukraine said, oh, the West has been violating international law. For example, the US invaded Iraq, which is true. That was a violation of international law. And then there was Kosovo war by the NATO, also true. It was unlawful. However, I would say that there are distinctive features that this war is now worse, although it also sounds ridiculous. It is a bigger violation of international law. It is more significant for the entire legal system. And so just to bring that to a closure, the reproach of double standards must be looked at carefully. And for example, China speaks of double standards all the time, and then they say we want a harmonious world order, so tell me what this harmony is supposed to be. So that's a tension. It's a big tension in international law, and it's very important. It goes to the core of the international legal system, and I think that this tension will lead to changes. That's clear, for the better or for the worse. So we are in the middle of a period of change.
Thank you. Of course, I give you.
Okay, how are you doing? Both fine still?
Yeah. Exhausted.
Yeah, please, your next question.
First thing I say yes, but for me, I think because also I don't have any arts history background. I didn't study art. I don't follow these canons that you mentioned. They do exist, yes, but I don't, and which makes me also makes me feel freer in doing what I do, because I don't follow anyone or any sort of canons, because I see it also when students go to certain universities, and there's a certain canons are required in their work, and there's always sort of borders that they cannot cross this. And this is something I witnessed in France when I stayed there as a student resident. It was a residency school of photography. The teachers always kind of preferred to their students do works about urbanism, and I did works about body, because I came from Syria and I never photographed the body, and I was fascinated. I did 1 year photographing myself, and this was very amazing experience for me, but I was never, they never paid attention to what I did, because it was not interesting for them, and it was not within their sort of caliber, let's say. So yeah, I do.
So there are rules.
There are rules, yes.
But you like to transgress them.
Yes.
And
I don't know what are they, so I'm
okay.
kind of that's why I said I feel more free. I mean the way I work, I just look for pain, and this is what the more I do now, the more I dive into this sort of feelings where stories, histories deals with pain, and I want to I don't know, maybe I'm. Sometimes I ask myself why I am doing this, because I would love to photograph flowers, for instance, but I don't. I always look for sadness and this sort of melancholic subjects that I get really absorbed.
And then are there also, you said, okay, they wanted urbanism, so there are also fashions, of course, right?
Yeah, there were yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
but you don't care for them.
I mean, it's not I don't care. I mean, it's something that I am not interested.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't have to give the point. I mean, this is just.
It's up to you.
Yeah. Okay, take it.
Very good. Next question for Anna.
Do you believe the International Court of Justice, with very few convictions overall, is an effective deterrent? What would be the alternative? I have to ask you a question back. Do you mean the International Criminal Court, which is in The Hague?
Yeah.
Okay, because there's also another court which sits over states, also in The Hague. But so the International Criminal Court has produced, I think, maybe like at best 5 or 3 or so, since it started working in 1998. The question of an effective deterrent. Of course, I can't give any scientific answer to that because I really don't know how to this contrafactually calculate what would have happened if not. I think probably in criminology there are studies or there is research about that, about deterrence, but I don't know it. It's not my field and I just can't give any valid answer on that. The International Court of Justice has other functions beside deterrence. It has maybe more like a symbolic or expressive function of making a signal which is maybe weaker than actually really deterring a dictator of committing a genocide or a crime of aggression or so, but signaling to everybody else, including to victims also of past crimes and so on, that this era of impunity, that this is now no longer tolerable also. So it's maybe a kind of symbolic justice, which to some may be cynical also, if it's not just say that it's a weak function, that could be a critique. But actually the main problem with which this International Criminal Court has struggled is that very important states have never ratified the statute, so they are not a member. Not the United States, not Russia, not Israel, not China, to mention only the few who are in military terms active, but who can never be tried before that court. And now, coming back to Ukraine and Russia, I've been speaking about the crime of aggression, and the crime of aggression cannot be tried before this court. So Russia cannot be brought, or Putin cannot be brought before this court for the crime of aggression. However, the court is competent to investigate other crimes, genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, before this court. And actually the collection of evidence and so on is already ongoing. So this surely did not deter Putin, but it is here, it is working. We don't know whether anything will come out of it, but in any case, it has already opened investigations. The other point which must be mentioned is that there was a big problem, or perceived problem and real problem, that the main trials and all the situations are in Africa. So there was the reproach that this is a kind of, again, a neo-colonial court composed of Western judges trying African politicians or former politicians. Because, and this comes back to your question before, the African states, they all ratified the statute. Probably they also got military aid, they also got economic development, cooperation and so on, and they miraculously, everybody ratified. But the big ones, they did not. So that is unjust, I would say, although legally speaking, a state is free to conclude a treaty or not, to accede to the court or not, but some are under pressure. On some, pressure can be exercised, on others not. So that's a problem, and this whole thing of colonial reproach has been a very, very strong critique against the court, besides the problem that it's quite costly and doesn't produce so many outcomes and so on. But I think that for the time being, this colonial reproach has become more silent, actually, and I think one explanation is that people realize more that actually all the African situations, all the African suspects or indicted persons the majority of them has been brought by their own country after change of government. That the new government then brings the old dictators in front of the court. So it's not that the West draws them before the court, but the countries themselves. And I think that is okay. And that's why I also think that it's not totally useless now to collect evidence with regard to Syria or with regard to Russia, because we don't know whether in 5 years or so, maybe if the tide changes, if there is a new government, then maybe the perpetrators will be drawn before the court. So, actually also the critique that just to close that point with Africa, for example, South Africa wanted to withdraw from the statute of this International Criminal Court exactly with the argument, well, it's all neo-colonial and so on. But the government wanted to pull out, and then the South African Constitutional Court told the government, the executive branch, you can't do that without the parliament. So and then South Africa had to drop that plan, and it's still in, and the whole thing of that it's neo-colonial is a bit silent now. So.
Okay.
Point.
I'm lecturing you all the time. Let's see.
I mean, I don't understand the question. It's like.
Yeah, well, maybe you already gave the answer before, because you said, I can't help, I'm doing all the sad stuff all the time. I want to do flowers, but somehow I can't. So you're not working yourself into a completely new theme or learn a new technique?
I thought you were saying retrying the same thing, and if you can improve it.
Yeah, like, with a variation. It's not, of course, not the same thing, but similar thing, same theme.
Yeah.
You can also use the Joker, actually.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I think I don't. If I change the theme that I am working on and do shift to completely different, I have the feeling I will become someone dishonest in my artistic career. Okay. This is a path that I chose, and I think I will continue doing this, because I am not looking for a commodity. I'm looking for something else, and I think it's something else that is more important than only myself. And I think that's why I don't see myself shifting to doing any other new experimental steps in my work.
Okay.
I mean, in technique, yes, because I did, because I was someone very photographically very orthodox, using only photography, but these past few years it really changed, and I started looking at things with different mediums. I did my first motion images like for the first time in 2014, and then I did a sound piece about mass graves in Spain. I did a sculpture, and I did the bird project, which is a more installation, and that project, it's more, for me, it's more about the story. I haven't done anything by hand. It's more the concept of the story that really attracted me, and I've seen the story of that bird. For me, it was more or less the story of the Syrians too, that they've been,
Okay, so what I see now is that you're not afraid of trying out new techniques and venturing into new techniques, but that maybe also has to do with the fact that before you said, oh, technique is easy, it doesn't matter so much. So that means that you are confident enough to try that out and think you can still produce a meaningful art, even if you're in a way a beginner in using bird styles.
But the thing is, it's different when I work with moving images or sculpture. I rely on other people in doing the final product.
Okay.
For instance, when filming, I do filming, but sculptures, I have no idea how to make sculptures, and that's how I came up with the idea, and I work with special people who work with artists to produce that work. But
Okay, that's also interesting. I had a question, but I didn't even send it to you, about the kind of collective production. Whether you think that it's a very singular, but you said that you
in my case, for me, my project, all of them are singular. I think generally I can't work with other people because it's very intimate, and I also need my space, and so I don't share the process with others.
Yeah, same for me.
Very good. So this question is
excellent.
answered.
Yes, fully
Very good.
satisfied.
You get your point. Ready for question number 5?
Oh God.
6 already. No.
5. Like, I'll keep it short now. How does the law deal with the ripple effects of trauma through subsequent generations caused by international conflicts? We spoke about that, and you yourself said that it's very important that it must be mutual. For example, there are techniques like truth-telling commissions, and where also perpetrators or presumed perpetrators offer apologies. There are also, that's a little bit different, the tool of amnesty, that with the idea that there should be a clean slate in order to be able to give a fresh start, that one should exactly try to not dig all that up. And this is often very controversial because some people say it may be necessary for a fresh start, others say it will exactly prevent the healing. So after the genocide in Rwanda, there were, I don't know how to pronounce them, but there were local committees which were rooted in the customary legal system of the country, which were completely different from a court as we know it. And that was in all the villages, that was used as a tool in order to come to grips with the past. And as I said, there is a whole area which is called transitional justice, which exactly describes all the mechanisms and all the techniques that can be designed. Transitional justice, exactly for this transition from a deep conflict to a new society. And there is also the German word, Vergangenheitsbewältigung, which I think is a good word. The past needs to be proactively dealt with.
Thank you.
I guess thank you is a point. Yeah, we are heading to the last 2 questions.
Yeah.
It's 5-5 until now.
Yeah.
The race is tight. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
That's a heavy question. I always see the aesthetics side of anything. It's a way of bringing the others towards you. So it's kind of a way to start a dialogue, and I think it is important, to have in either legal text or also in artistic works. I mean, for me it is because at the end of you need something, you want something to attract, to bring the person, and this is something I mean it's very important when I take pictures, and this is something I think I took from my father, that for instance when it comes to straight lines in images and stuff, and that's really, for me, it becomes very very important that if a line is not straight and the image is not good, I have to redo it again. And I think, I mean, it is, for me, it's a way to make the other person stand longer in front of the image and look further than just the surface that is on the print. Yeah, I don't know if this answers your question.
Yeah,
No.
it doesn't really answer it, but I think it's a very nice answer.
Okay.
It's also the question triggered a very nice reflection.
Okay.
Which I hadn't thought of it like that. It's that the beauty is that the beauty means communication. That's nice. That's a really nice idea. So you get it.
It's a nice
Yeah.
Next one vorne.
Yeah,
And
and
please turn
yes.
the card.
Yeah. In my work, I often deal with very direct personal stories of trauma, while you write from an academic and legal point of view, looking at the bigger picture. At what distance do you protect yourself from being emotionally affected? Can you? I think that's exactly the mirror of the question I asked you. Can art not be political? So, on a different register, but yeah, of course, the ideal or the old-fashioned ideal of scholarship is that it is rational, that it is an intellectual exercise, but I think, now speaking only for legal scholarship, and that's also what I mentioned in my talk at the end, in German, for example, we use the word Rechtsgefühl. It's a feeling of justice or injustice. So astonishingly, we use the word feeling in that. And I think that the whole hype of rationality, which also, of course, has a gendered aspect, that rational is masculine and so on, that this is very much called into question or put into perspective with new research on how unrational people are on all fronts. Also in politics and in law and so on, and therefore I think that it is not per se bad to bring emotion into scholarship. Although there is this tension with the critical distance, that if you're emotional, then you're pulled too much in. So that means I don't really want to protect myself from being emotionally affected. So because the emotion is also a driver of working yourself more into a topic and so on. So it can also help you to produce even scholarly arguments. So therefore, yeah, I don't try so much, and I also think it would be impossible, actually. So I cannot. But there is a certain tension, of course. At some point, if you would only scream around, "This is unfair," that's no legal argument. Actually, I just heard yesterday that fair, to say something is fair, that this is racist, because fair means blonde, and that's racist. That's all.
Thank you.
That's for sure a point.
I think you need to take another.
Oh yes, and I will gladly.
Your last question there. Okay, please get ready. Turn it around.
Natural law is immutable standards of justice or fairness beyond the written.
You still have two jokers you didn't play. Go ahead.
Natural law, that is immutable standards of justice or fairness beyond the written law, i.e. standards
From God.
flowing from God or from pure reason, are nowadays no longer accepted in secular legal systems. What about immutable standards of beauty in artworks? Do they exist? Can I change this? Use my joker. a solitary worker, or do you need discussion? I do need discussion, but nobody wants to discuss with me. Because all the subjects, I mean, I think even my friends, I have the feeling now, every time I just start talking about a subject that I want to discuss, they start puffing around and say, not again, do you not ever do something else? And I feel it, but it's, as I said earlier, I am getting dragged even into more deeper depth in this kind of topics, and I won't say I enjoy it, but I have somehow makes me feel in a better position when other people see these sort of stories and how people survive and live these days. And I am, when it comes to work, I am more solitary, yes. I don't, when it's on the field, I don't like to be around people, and I just want to do things on my own. Yeah.
But I think so many people came to hear about your work, so I think it's not true that nobody wants to hear what you have to say on your art.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think after a couple of days that would change. Yeah. I mean, it's I mean, when I had a show a few months ago in Holland, in Maastricht, and people were crying seeing these works. And this something, it really touches me a lot, because I see them also. They have nothing to do with the whole subject matter, but for me this is kind of, it gives me also a relief that I'm reaching someone who is getting affected and getting feelings from what is presented, and it's and this is, for me, it's more such an important thing as an artist to share and to reach as well.
Yeah. Yes, take the ball, please.
There's your point, yeah, you managed. Thanks to the Joker. Your last question is coming up.
Yeah.
Please turn it.
Looking at the world today, do I see hope? The challenges are extreme, of course, and I think worst of all, most important, the ecological climate, including so the entire environment, the extinction of animals and plants at a really huge pace, like the extinction of those birds and so many other species, organisms we don't even know, plus the enormous idiocy of men. And I really get angry because if you look at how a very small number of short men inflict suffering on the entire world, I think we really have to look at these aspects also under a gender perspective. So, but that doesn't answer your question. Of course, there is, I think hope dies last, that's what's always being said, and it depends on whether maybe your inherent character, whether you are more a person seeing the glass half full or half empty, and that how your emotional or setup is, that's determined probably by many factors, epigenetics and so on, and maybe what you do with your art, that you say you inevitably you always have to do that you has to do with your with what you inherited, indeed. So others have other life experiences and therefore look at the world differently. I personally I have some hope that the ecologic issues will be not resolved, but that humans will find techniques, for example, to to get the CO2 out of the atmosphere, to give just one example. But of course, the extinguished species can never be revived. Maybe there will be genetic engineering. I don't know. Actually, to be honest, maybe I just don't think too much about that, because it's too speculative anyway, and I just try to carry on, muddle through in a way, without any grand scheme or theory about the development of the world. But of course, I feel sorry for our children, and I see many of the younger persons be really affected in their daily lives from the prospects of catastrophe, and that they feel numbed, and they are overly pessimistic, much more pessimistic than I am, and that has to do, I think, with the atmosphere of our times. But I can't, I can't help them. They have to kind of come to square that for themselves. So, not a good ending of this. So, yeah.
Thank you. So, the last one.
Yeah.
You get another point.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. You made it.
Yeah.
Congratulations. And you didn't make it yet, so you will see 2 movie clips, you will see 1 game, and you hear 1 song. At the end of this, you will have to choose who chose what. And of course, you can also win some trophies. So. First one. First movie, Frida Kahlo. Second one, we're going to see something out of Stalker.
Профессор, подойдите к нам.
Okay. Now we're gonna go over to a game. Backgammon, the last one you will hear now is a song. the last times it was too easy for the audience, so we tried to make it a bit more difficult. So this is a kind of a, if you are into a German sport building system, it would be called Kombi-Wette. So you have all of your decisions have to be right, it cannot only be one. And I mean, you have to decide this just by raising hands, right? So who of you thinks option 1, that Hrair's favorite movie is Frida Kahlo and he likes to play backgammon? Okay. Option 2. Anne's favorite movie is Frida Kahlo and she likes to play backgammon. Okay. Option 3, Hrair's favorite movie is Stalker and he listens to Mozart. Okay. One, thank you. Option 4, who thinks that Anne's favorite movie is Stalker and she listens to Mozart? Alright, here we go. We are heading to the last option, so
I think everyone's confused.
but that's my goal.
We know what's right. We are not confused.
There's one more option, I think. Exactly, yes. Who thinks if it's Hrair whose favorite movie is Frida Kahlo and he listens to Mozart?
Thank you.
So I gather you
Anne
hate
Peter's favorite
Mozart.
movie is Frida Kahlo and she listens to Mozart. Okay, I think we successfully managed to confuse you. That's well done. So please tell us, what is your favorite movie?
Frida Kahlo.
Yes. So yours is Stalker, that's clear. Then please tell us.
Favorite game is Wagenmann.
So you know best who gave the right answer?
Only the last were right, I think. Everybody else.
You said that you were right, so you also get a trophy. You have to be a bit careful because these are bouncing balls, so if they jump around. Who else was right?